The morning sun filtered through the kitchen blinds, casting warm patterns across the breakfast table. I stood at the stove, carefully arranging the pancakes in the specific flower pattern that made my daughter Emma smile. After 15 years in high-level security operations, these simple domestic routines had become my newfound peace. "Dad, are you making your famous blueberry pancakes?" Emma called from her bedroom. "Yes, they will be ready in exactly 3 minutes and 27 seconds," I replied, my voice carrying down the hallway. I heard the familiar mechanical hum of her motorized wheelchair approaching. Emma had been born with spinal muscular atrophy, a progressive condition that affected her muscle movement and strength. Despite the physical challenges, her mind remained sharp and her spirit unbreakable. Her wheelchair entered the kitchen, adorned with colorful stickers from national parks we had visited together. "You are so precise. You never stopped being Agent Dad, did you?" she teased, her bright eyes crinkling at the corners. I placed the pancake plate in front of her, arranged exactly as she liked it. Some habits are hard to break. Besides, precision matters when creating culinary masterpieces. After my wife passed away 3 years ago, Emma became my entire world. My security agency granted me early retirement with full benefits so I could dedicate myself to her care. We decided a fresh start would be best for both of us. The suburban community of Oak Ridge Estates seemed perfect: quiet streets, good schools with accessibility programs, and a location close to Emma's specialists. Our modest three-bedroom home required modifications. We installed ramps, widened doorways, and adapted the bathroom with special fixtures. The backyard became my project of pride, a therapeutic garden with raised beds Emma could tend from her wheelchair, a small water feature for sensory stimulation, and a smooth concrete path winding through it all. The neighbors initially seemed welcoming. Mrs. Peterson from across the street brought over a homemade casserole our first week. The Johnsons next door offered to help with yard work. Even Mr. Grayson, the elderly gentleman at the corner house, made a point to wave whenever we passed. During our second week, a group of board members from the Homeowners Association came by with a welcome basket. They seemed pleasant enough, reviewing community guidelines while complimenting our move-in progress. Among them stood a woman who barely smiled, her eyes scanning our property with obvious scrutiny rather than welcome. Patricia Wellington introduced herself as the HOA president with a firm handshake and a business card pressed into my palm. "We maintain very high standards in Oak Ridge," she stated, her gaze lingering on the wheelchair ramp leading to our front door. "I trust you will ensure all modifications comply with our architectural guidelines." I nodded politely, explaining that all changes were ADA compliant and necessary for Emma's mobility. She smiled thinly before departing with the others. That evening, Emma and I sat on our adapted back porch, watching fireflies emerge in the gathering dusk. "Do you think we will be happy here, Dad?" Emma asked, her voice soft. I placed my hand over hers, feeling the delicate bones beneath her skin. "I believe we will. This is our fresh start, our new beginning. You will make friends at school, I will find local hobbies that do not involve surveillance techniques, and we will build a peaceful life together." Emma smiled, tilting her face toward the fading sunlight. I liked the sound of that, normal and peaceful. How wrong I was. The peace we sought would be shattered in ways I never anticipated. The security specialist in me should have recognized the warning signs. Patricia Wellington, the woman Emma and I would soon come to know simply as Karen, had already marked us as targets. Our quiet life was heading toward a storm neither of us saw coming. Spring arrived in Oak Ridge Estates, bringing with it warmer days perfect for Emma to enjoy her therapeutic garden. 6 weeks had passed since our arrival, and we had settled into comfortable routines. Emma attended physical therapy 3 times weekly, participated in an online art class, and spent hours in our backyard sanctuary when weather permitted. That particular Tuesday afternoon remained etched in my memory with painful clarity. The temperature had reached a pleasant 72 degrees, ideal for Emma to work with her sensory plants. I set up her gardening tools within easy reach of her wheelchair, filled her water bottle, and applied sunscreen to her exposed skin. "Call if you need anything. I will be in the home office on a video conference, but I can see you through the window," I told her, adjusting her wide-brimmed hat. "Dad, I am 12, not 5, Emma replied with the exasperated sigh of emerging adolescence. "Go work. I want to repot my lathe. Endure plants." I smiled and retreated to my office, positioning my laptop so I could glance outside between work slides. 20 minutes into my conference call, movement at our back gate caught my attention. Through the window, I observed Patricia Wellington, clipboard in hand, entering our yard without permission or invitation. My security instincts immediately heightened. I excused myself from the call and moved toward the back door, watching as Patricia approached Emma. From my position, I could hear their exchange. "Young lady, these garden beds were not approved by the architectural committee," Patricia stated coldly, gesturing to the raised planters I had built for Emma. Emma looked up, confusion evident on her face. "My dad built them so I could reach my plants from my wheelchair. They are just wooden boxes." Patricia consulted her clipboard. "We have no record of approval for these structures, the stone path, or that water feature. All external modifications require prior written approval." I pushed open the door and stepped outside. "Patricia, if there are forms needed, I am happy to submit them. These modifications are necessary accommodations for Emma." Patricia turned toward me, her posture rigid. "Rules apply to everyone, Mr. Reynolds. Special needs do not exempt you from following proper protocols." I noticed she carried a rubber ball in her left hand, the kind neighborhood children played with. Emma noticed it too. "Is that Timmy's ball from next door?" Emma asked innocently. "He has been looking for it since yesterday." Patricia's grip tightened on the ball. "Toys left in common areas are confiscated according to Section 7 of our community guidelines. His parents can retrieve it after paying the standard violation fee." Emma made a small sound of distress. "But he is only 6. He was so sad about losing it." Patricia's face darkened at the perceived challenge to her authority. What happened next occurred so quickly that despite my trained reflexes, I could not prevent it. Patricia Wellington, 57 years old and president of the Oak Ridge Estates HOA, deliberately threw the rubber ball with shocking force. It struck Emma directly on her right shoulder before bouncing away across the garden. Emma cried out in pain, her body recoiling in her wheelchair. The look of shock and hurt on her face ignited something primal within me. In my years of security work, I had maintained composure during hostage negotiations, covert operations, and high-risk scenarios. But in that moment, seeing my daughter struck deliberately, I felt a white-hot rage unlike anything I had experienced professionally. I crossed the yard in 3 long strides, positioning myself between Emma and Patricia. My voice emerged low and controlled, years of training preventing the outburst my paternal instinct demanded. "You just assaulted my disabled child. Leave my property immediately." Patricia's expression showed no remorse, only annoyed surprise that I would challenge her. "Do not be dramatic. It was just a ball. Perhaps if your daughter learned to respect community rules and authority figures, such corrections would not be necessary. Emma sobbed behind me, her hand clutching her shoulder where an angry red mark was already forming. My training kicked in automatically: assess the threat, protect the vulnerable, de-escalate but maintain tactical advantage. I am not going to ask again, I stated, my tone carrying the unmistakable weight of someone accustomed to being obeyed in crisis situations. Leave now. Something in my demeanor must have registered with Patricia because she took a step back. You will be receiving multiple violation notices by mail. I suggest you come into compliance quickly to avoid accumulating fines. She turned and walked stiffly toward the gate. As soon as she exited, I knelt beside Emma, gently examining her shoulder. A bruise was already forming on her delicate skin. "Why does she hate me, Dad?" Emma asked through tears, her voice small and confused. "I did not do anything wrong." I gathered her carefully into my arms, mindful of her condition. "She does not hate you, sweetheart. Some people become so obsessed with rules and power that they forget about kindness and decency." As I held my trembling daughter, comforting her in our violated sanctuary, something shifted within me. The security specialist I had tried to leave behind when we moved to Oak Ridge stirred to wakefulness. Patricia Wellington had made a critical error in judgment. She had threatened what I valued most, and she had no idea who she was dealing with. Emma's tearful question echoed in my mind as I documented her injury with my phone camera. Why would someone do this to me? It was a question I intended to answer in ways Patricia Wellington would never anticipate. My hands moved with practiced efficiency as I gathered ice for Emma's shoulder. Years of field medical training took over while I documented the injury from multiple angles on my phone. The security agent in me cataloged details automatically: time of incident, exact words exchanged, physical description of the assault. "Does it hurt a lot when I press here?" I asked Emma gently, my fingers lightly probing the bruising area. Emma winced but shook her head bravely. "It is more shocking than painful. I cannot believe an adult would do that." Neither could I while Emma rested with her favorite book and an ice pack. I retrieved my incident documentation notebook from a locked drawer in my office. Old habits from my security career had never fully disappeared. I transcribed the entire confrontation, including verbatim quotes, time stamps, and environmental conditions. I drew a diagram of positions in the yard and the trajectory of the thrown ball. The next morning, I took Emma to her pediatrician. Dr. Matthews frowned as she examined the now purple bruise spanning Emma's shoulder. "This was caused by an adult throwing a ball at her?" she asked incredulously. "The HOA president," I confirmed. Dr. Matthews shook her head, documenting the injury in Emma's medical chart. "I am noting this as a minor assault, which it clearly is. You have my medical report if you need it for any formal complaints." Armed with documentation, photographs, and medical assessment, I followed proper channels. I scheduled a meeting with the HOA board through their official process, submitted a written complaint via certified mail, and researched the HOA's bylaws regarding member conduct and disciplinary procedures. 3 days later, I sat before the 5-member board in their wood-paneled meeting room. Patricia Wellington presided from a slightly elevated chair at the center, her expression impassive as I presented my case. The other 4 board members, 2 men and 2 women, maintained poker faces throughout my presentation. I kept my tone measured and professional. As demonstrated by the medical report and photographs, Ms. Wellington deliberately struck my daughter with sufficient force to cause bruising. This constitutes assault on a minor with a disability. I am requesting formal censure, a written apology, and assurance this behavior will not be repeated. After I finished speaking, Patricia leaned forward. "Mr. Reynolds clearly misinterpreted an unfortunate accident. I was simply returning a confiscated toy to his yard when it accidentally went in his daughter's direction. Furthermore, his aggressive response to this accident is concerning, especially given the numerous unapproved modifications to his property that precipitated the interaction." The narrative manipulation was skillful. I watched as the other board members nodded subtly, already convinced by whatever version Patricia had presented before my arrival. The board secretary, a thin man with wire-rimmed glasses, cleared his throat. "We appreciate your bringing this to our attention, Mr. Reynolds. The board will discuss the matter in closed session and respond in writing within 30 days, per our bylaws." The dismissal was polite but definitive. As I gathered my documents, the woman seated farthest from Patricia caught my eye momentarily, her expression suggesting she might have believed me. But she quickly looked away when Patricia glanced in her direction. Outside in the parking lot, a hand touched my elbow. I turned to find an older woman I recognized from 3 houses down from mine. "Mr. Reynolds," she whispered, her eyes darting nervously toward the building. "I saw what happened in your yard. Patricia has been terrorizing this neighborhood for years. Nobody stands up to her because she always gets revenge." "You witnessed the incident?" I asked. She nodded but stepped back. "I cannot get involved. Last time someone crossed her, she found building code violations on their property and had the city issue thousands in fines. She has connections everywhere. She owns this place. Everyone who crosses her regrets it." Before I could respond, she hurried to her car. Driving home, a familiar coldness settled in my chest, the same detached clarity I had experienced during complex security operations. Conventional approaches would not work against an entrenched power structure. Patricia Wellington had corrupted the very systems designed to provide accountability. As I watched Emma through the kitchen window, attempting to paint despite her sore shoulder, my resolve hardened. My security career had taught me that when official channels fail, alternative strategies become necessary. I had dismantled criminal networks and neutralized security threats across 6 continents. Patricia Wellington had no idea who she had chosen as an adversary when she decided to target my daughter. The security agent I had tried to leave behind was fully awake now, and he was getting to work. My home office transformed overnight. The desk where I had been handling simple freelance security consultations became command central for what I now viewed as Operation Accountability. After Emma went to bed, I pulled out equipment and resources from my former life equipment most civilians would never possess or know how to utilize. Few people in Oak Ridge Estates knew my professional background. After 15 years working for specialized security firms with government contracts, I had developed a particular set of skills. Risk assessment, threat neutralization, intelligence gathering, and pattern recognition were as natural to me as breathing. Before retiring to care for Emma, I had led teams that protected diplomats, investigated corporate espionage, and occasionally dismantled corruption networks. I began systematically. First, public records. Patricia Wellington had served as HOA president for 7 consecutive years, despite bylaws stipulating term limits of 2 consecutive 2-year terms. A bylaws amendment had been passed 4 years ago, removing those limits in a special meeting attended by suspiciously few residents. Financial records proved more challenging but not impossible to obtain. The HOA was registered as a nonprofit corporation, requiring certain public filings. I noticed immediately that administrative expenses had increased 340% under Patricia's leadership, with no detailed accounting provided to members. Maintenance contracts consistently went to Wellington Property Services, a company I traced to Patricia's brother-in-law. My investigation expanded concentrically. I created a secure online survey distributed through an anonymous neighborhood email chain, collecting experiences from current and former residents. Patterns emerged quickly. 23 homeowners had moved away specifically because of HOA harassment. 37 reported selective enforcement of rules. 19 described personal vendettas after disagreeing with Patricia at meetings. Mrs. Abernathy, a 78-year-old widow who had sold her home of 30 years at a significant loss, agreed to meet me at a coffee shop 15 miles from Oak Ridge. Patricia targeted me after I questioned maintenance costs at a meeting, she explained, her hands trembling around her teacup. Suddenly, my rose bushes violated height restrictions, my mailbox needed replacing, my screen door color was non-compliant. The fines accumulated faster than my fixed income could manage. I documented everything meticulously, creating files for each incident. My dining room wall, covered when Emma was home, became an investigation board at night. Photographs, documents, and connection strings mapping the network of control Patricia had established. Former board members proved particularly illuminating. Marcus Chen, who had resigned 3 years earlier, met me in a park 2 towns over. She falsified meeting minutes, he confided. Votes that never happened, approvals never granted. When I threatened to expose her, she somehow got building inspectors to find code violations in my home office where I ran my accounting business. The resulting citations nearly cost me my professional license. I expanded my investigation to Patricia's personal residence. Late one evening, using surveillance techniques from my professional days, I documented numerous violations on her own property: an unauthorized pool house, non-compliant fencing, and extensive landscaping that exceeded permissible coverage. None had received citations. The most damning evidence came from financial tracking. Using skills from corporate fraud investigations, I followed the money trail from HOA dues through various accounts. Approximately $43,000 per year was being channeled through overpriced contracts to companies connected to Patricia or her family members. An additional $27,000 had disappeared into consultant fees for services never rendered. My storage unit gradually filled with evidence, original documents in fireproof containers, digital backups encrypted and stored securely, recorded interviews properly logged and transcribed. I worked with the precision my security background demanded, knowing any procedural error could compromise the entire operation. The breakthrough came unexpectedly through Emma. During dinner one evening, she mentioned her new friend Sophia, whose father worked at the county records office. Sophia says her dad is always complaining about the lady from our neighborhood who keeps trying to get building permits approved without proper inspections. Emma commented casually. This led me to Robert Gonzalez, who provided copies of repeatedly rejected permit applications for Patricia's property, followed by mysteriously approved resubmissions signed by a different inspector. That inspector retired suddenly last year, Robert explained during our discreet meeting. Bought a vacation home in Florida nobody could figure out how he afforded. As my investigation neared its 3rd week, I assembled the final case file. Patricia Wellington had created a virtually untouchable position through intimidation, financial impropriety, and strategic connections with local officials. She had systematically targeted anyone who threatened her authority, using the HOA as a personal weapon and financial resource. Late one night, Reviewing my evidence wall, I felt a grim satisfaction. In my former career, I had tracked individuals who thought themselves untouchable due to power, money, or connections. They all shared the same critical weakness, the belief in their own invulnerability. Patricia Wellington had ruled Oak Ridge Estates through fear for 7 years. She had thrown a ball at my disabled daughter without a second thought, confident there would be no consequences. She had chosen the wrong target. She had no idea that the quiet, polite father she had dismissed was methodically dismantling her power base, using skills honed in far more dangerous environments than suburban America. The security specialist had completed his investigation. Now it was time for strategic action. Military strategy teaches that timing and coordination are everything. Dismantling an entrenched system requires precision, patience, and simultaneous pressure from multiple directions. I approached operation accountability with the same methodical planning I had used in high-risk security operations. First came alliance building. I identified key neighbors whose experiences with Patricia created potential allies but whose fear had kept them silent. The Garcias, whose request for a small religious statue in their garden had resulted in mounting fines. The Williamsons, whose foster children were banned from playing in the communal park without proper supervision. Dr. Lowe, whose permitted home office had been subjected to relentless, random inspections. I approached each carefully, meeting in locations outside the neighborhood, presenting selective evidence that their experiences were part of a pattern, not isolated incidents. Trust built slowly. "What you are describing is exactly what happened to us," Mrs. Garcia whispered during our meeting at a library 2 towns over. "But what can anyone do? She controls everything." "Not everything," I replied, "and not for much longer." I consulted with an attorney specializing in HOA law, carefully selected from outside our county, to avoid Patricia's network of influence. Attorney Sarah Mendelson reviewed my evidence files with increasing disbelief. "This is one of the most comprehensive cases of HOA abuse and financial impropriety I have encountered," she stated. "You have done work that would typically require a team of investigators." With her guidance, I prepared formal complaints to multiple agencies simultaneously. The State Attorney General's Office, the Department of Housing and Urban Development, the County Ethics Commission, and the State Real Estate Board that oversaw HOA regulations. Simultaneous filing prevents the complaints from being quietly dismissed through individual connections, Attorney Mendelson advised. Multiple agencies create accountability for each other. I established secure communication channels with my growing network of allies, using encryption techniques from my professional background. Neighborhood meetings occurred under the guise of book clubs or dinner gatherings, always at different locations, always with careful screening for electronic surveillance. Paranoid perhaps, but my security training emphasized that thoroughness prevents compromise. Patricia sensed the shifting landscape beneath her kingdom. Her tactics escalated predictably. Violation notices appeared daily on our door: improper garbage can placement, unauthorized garden structures, non-compliant mailbox height, anonymous complaints about noise from Emma's medical equipment, cars driving slowly past our house photographing every detail of our property. The psychological warfare affected Emma despite my efforts to shield her. She began checking windows before venturing into our yard. Her sleep was disrupted by nightmares about the angry lady. The bruise on her shoulder had faded, but the emotional impact lingered. "Why does she hate us so much, Dad?" Emma asked one evening as I tucked her into bed. "What did we do wrong?" I sat beside her, choosing my words carefully. Some people become so focused on controlling others that they forget how to be human. This is not about you or me. This is about someone who has had power for so long she believes she deserves it regardless of how she uses it. Each night after Emma fell asleep, I questioned my choices. Was I subjecting my daughter to unnecessary stress? Should we simply move away and start fresh elsewhere? Then I would remember the ball striking her, her tears, the helplessness in her eyes, Patricia's utter lack of remorse. Running would teach Emma the wrong lesson about injustice. During my security career, I had dismantled operations far more sophisticated than Patricia's name. Orhood tyranny. The formal notice of an emergency HOA meeting arrived after my attorney submitted notarized requests from the legally required number of homeowners. The first such meeting called in 5 years without Patricia's initiation. Through my network, I learned of her frantic phone calls to board members, her attempts to cancel the meeting on procedural grounds, her increasingly desperate efforts to maintain control. The date was set for exactly 1 month after the ball-throwing incident, a symbolic timeline I had specifically requested. The night before the meeting, I sat alone in my office reviewing my presentation materials. Everything was precisely organized, evidence irrefutable, delivery choreographed for maximum impact. Patricia Wellington had no idea that her reign was about to face its most significant challenge, orchestrated by someone trained to dismantle threats systematically. Tomorrow would change everything for Oak Ridge Estates. The security specialist was ready for the final operation. The Oak Ridge Estates Community Center had never been so crowded. By the time I arrived with my materials, 15 minutes before the scheduled meeting, every seat was filled. Residents stood along walls, some sitting cross-legged on the floor in available spaces. The energy in the room felt electric, charged with anticipation and nervousness. Patricia Wellington arrived 5 minutes late, a calculated power move I had anticipated. She entered flanked by the other board members, her expression confidently neutral. She wore a crisp blue blazer with gold buttons, a costume of authority. The whispers ceased as she approached the front table, placing her gavel and binder precisely before her. This emergency meeting of the Oak Ridge Estates Homeowners Association will come to order, she announced, voice carrying through the room without need for the microphone. While I question the necessity and proper procedure for calling this meeting, we will proceed according to bylaws. She glanced at me briefly, dismissively, before consulting her agenda. First order of business, reading of minutes from previous meeting. The delaying tactic was transparent. Reading lengthy minutes would consume valuable time and drain energy from the room. I had prepared for this. Point of order, I stated, rising from my seat in the front row. Emergency meetings under Bylaw Section 4.7 begin with the presentation of the emergency matter necessitating the meeting. Minutes are waived until regular session. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Patricia's eyes narrowed slightly, her only visible reaction to being challenged on procedural grounds, her typical weapon of choice. Mr. Reynolds appears to have recently become an expert on our bylaws, she commented drily. Very well. You have 15 minutes to present your emergency matter. I approached the podium calmly, connecting my laptop to the projector system. My security training had prepared me for high-pressure presentations to government officials and corporate boards. This was familiar territory. Residents of Oak Ridge Estates, I began, my voice measured and clear. 1 month ago today, our HOA president threw a ball with deliberate force at my disabled daughter, causing physical injury and emotional distress. The photograph of Emma's bruised shoulder appeared on screen, followed by the medical report. Patricia's voice cut through the gasps. "This is slander. I have already explained to the board that this was an unfortunate accident that Mr. Reynolds has exploited to distract from his numerous violations." I continued as if she had not spoken. "This incident led me to investigate whether it represented an isolated lapse in judgment or part of a pattern of behavior. What I discovered affects everyone in this room." For the next 12 minutes, I methodically presented evidence of financial impropriety, selective rule enforcement, falsified meeting minutes, and bylaw violations. Charts displayed the flow of HOA funds to companies connected to Patricia's family. Photographs showed her property's unpermitted modifications, alongside violation notices issued to neighbors for lesser infractions. Patricia's interruptions grew increasingly desperate. "Point of order. This presentation contains unauthorized access to private records. This is a personal vendetta with no bearing on HOA operations." The board secretary, Mr. Winters, removed his glasses slowly. "How do you respond to the financial discrepancies shown here, Patricia? These are significant irregularities." Patricia's face flushed. Complex HOA finances can appear irregular to those without proper context. Mr. Reynolds has manipulated information to create a false impression. The turning point came unexpectedly. Elderly Mr. Jenkins rose shakily from his seat, supporting himself with a cane. "I have something to say," he announced, his voice wavering but determined. "3 years ago, when my Tha was dying of cancer, we fell behind on paying a fine for having a bird feeder that was 2 inches taller than regulations allowed. Patricia personally came to our home and threatened to place a lien if we did not pay immediately, plus late fees. I had to withdraw money from Martha's medication fund to pay it." His testimony broke the dam of silence. One by one, residents stood to share their experiences. Mrs. Abernathy described being forced to sell. The Garcias recounted religious discrimination disguised as rule enforcement. Dr. Lowe detailed harassment that nearly cost his medical license. Patricia's face transformed from confident to ashen as the stories mounted. Her attempts to use the gavel were drowned out by the voices of those finally speaking their truth. The board member at the far end, Mrs. Chen, spoke up. "I move that we hold an immediate vote of no confidence in the current HOA president, as permitted under Bylaw Section 5.3 for gross misconduct." The motion was seconded instantly by multiple voices. When the vote was called, hands raised throughout the room. The count was not even close, 87-3 for removal. As the gavel fell confirming the decision, Patricia's face contorted with the unfamiliar experience of accountability. "This is a coordinated attack, a conspiracy, a witch hunt orchestrated by a vindictive newcomer." Her final accusations fell on ears now deaf to her manipulation. The security specialist in me recognized the look of someone whose power had evaporated in an instant. It was a look I had seen before in very different circumstances. Justice had been served, systematically and by the book. Patricia Wellington stormed from the community center that night, leaving behind her gavel and 7 years of unchecked authority. The remaining board members, suddenly freed from her influence, voted unanimously to appoint an interim president and launch a full financial audit. The following weeks brought remarkable transformation to Oak Ridge Estates. New leadership established transparency protocols, publishing detailed financial records and meeting minutes online for all residents to access. The architectural review process was reformed with clear guidelines and appeals procedures. Most significantly, a community oversight committee was formed to prevent future consolidation of power. Legal consequences mounted for Patricia as the financial investigation expanded. The county prosecutor opened a case for misappropriation of HOA funds. 3 former board members provided sworn statements about falsified documents and coerced votes. By autumn, Patricia had accepted a plea agreement requiring full restitution of misappropriated funds, over $170,000 accumulated during her tenure. Her house went on the market before the first snow fell. The moving truck departed without neighborhood fanfare or farewell gatherings. Patricia Wellington simply disappeared from our lives, leaving behind only stories that would gradually evolve into neighborhood legend. More meaningful than systemic change was the transformation in Emma. Her smile returned, genuine and unburdened by fear. She began spending time in her garden again, eventually inviting neighborhood children to help plant a community butterfly garden in a previously unused common area. "Dad, do you think we could make these raised beds for the community garden too, so kids in wheelchairs from other neighborhoods could garden here?" she asked one Saturday morning, her face animated with purpose. "I think that is an excellent idea," I replied, my heart swelling with pride at her resilience and compassion. Former strangers became friends who checked on us regularly. Neighborhood gatherings resumed after years of declining participation. The Oak Ridge Estates Community Day, revived after a 7-year hiatus, centered around Emma's butterfly garden dedication. One evening as summer transitioned to fall, Mrs. Chen, now the properly elected HOA president, stopped by as Emma directed a group of children painting stepping stones for the community path. "You know, Mr. Reynolds," she said quietly, watching Emma laughing with her new friends, "this neighborhood needed someone with your particular skills. We were stuck in a cycle of intimidation for so long that we forgot communities are built on cooperation, not fear." The irony was not lost on me. Years of specialized security training, deployed across global theaters of conflict, had ultimately found their most meaningful application in a suburban HOA dispute. The skills honed protecting government interests had been used to protect something far more precious, a community where my daughter could grow up feeling safe and valued. The security agent in me had never truly retired. He had simply found a more meaningful perimeter to defend. Sometimes the most important operations are not those that make headlines, but those that restore justice to everyday lives. Sometimes the most valuable. Security is not national but personal, protecting the simple right of a child to play without fear in her own backyard.